perspective, but also from the perspective of security. So really useful tips and tricks which he shared. So let me just share my slides. Yeah. Okay, hope you can see my slides clear and you can hear me
Yes.
fine. Also, thank you, Samik, for briefing up and giving up introduction about me. So I'll take over this session. And before I move with the agenda, let me just quickly give you some heads up for this event which we have planned for you all. So this is definitely one day virtual event. I hope you are enjoying the sessions across tracks, track 1, track 2, track 3. I would really appreciate if you stay till the end because we have an amazing quiz at the end of the day, which is around 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m. IST time. So please stay tuned till the end and take part in the quiz. And we have great, amazing prizes as you can see on the screen. Maybe you are the lucky winner who can win any of the prize. So diving deep into today's session, which I have planned for you. So this session is best practices for data loss prevention policies in Power Platform. So this is really interesting session and probably a very intriguing one when we talk about Power Platform and security. Data loss prevention policies is one of the biggest part. Maybe everyone who have worked with Power Platform, they would have come across this statement that DLP policy is permission related. When I share these screenshots or when I demo this, maybe you will get more clarity on, yeah, I also have seen this error and why this error comes up when I try to use some connectors, maybe how I can set this up for my environment at my organization or tenant level. So we're going to talk a really deep about data loss prevention policy and just a brief short introduction about me because I want to cover a lot today. So I'll keep it very short. So myself, Srushti Shah, and I am Microsoft MVP. Also, I'm working as a technical consultant at Rapid Circle across various Microsoft stack. So let's just dive straight to the agenda. As you can see, what I have is uh, we will discuss about why there is a need for DLP policies. Firstly, because unless and until you understand why data loss prevention policies are required, you will never be able to get through the data loss prevention policies in depth. Next, the giving just a short overview, and we'll create a data loss prevention policy. We'll see that if I want to create a DLP policy, what are the prerequisites? We'll see it through the example, also through the demo at the end, and how you can manage these DLP policies. These DLP policies are classified into three categories. What are those? And why those categories are called as groups? And why is it specifically? You will see that into depth because I think RO just gave you the glimpse of these three categories like business, non-business, blocked. What exactly are those? Where you can find them? How you can play with it? We'll see that. Connectors definitely we'll see. You just got a glimpse from RO session, but we are going to deep dive into it. And along with that, definitely another aspect, another layer everyone, whoever is working in Power Platform may would have heard about custom connectors. So can you also apply DLP policies to your custom connectors? So the answer is yes. How you can do that, we'll check out. And impact of these DLP policies in your applications and flows. So once you create the policies, how this will be impacted across your environments or in your tenants. So we are going to see that. So let's just straight away dive into the agenda. The first bit and instance is the need for data loss prevention policy. So when I talk about why do we need DLP policies, so is there any really need for it? The answer is yes, there is a need for DLP policies, and there are three pointers by which I define this. First is with the rapid build and rollout of high value applications and automations for your users to measure and act on the data in real time. By this statement, what I mean is you would have already probably created n number of Power applications and Power Automate flows, be it just for notifying or using Outlook or sending out in messages in Teams or creating Canvas apps just for a user interface for your users to fill out the form. So when you create an app or flow, you just know that hey, I can create it and I can use its connectors. But is there any way which I where I can where as an organization you can prevent from for your users to just block as in prevent for your users so that they will not be able to use it. Let's say I want to send a message to Teams whenever something happens in SharePoint. Now, because your organization is allowing you, Hence, you are able to use SharePoint with Teams, with Outlook, etc. whenever you create flows or Power Apps. But let's say your organization has applied policies by which you can only use SharePoint with Outlook, but you can't use Teams with Outlook because they fall into different groups. So that is when you will encounter that DLP policy error. And why this is needed? Because it is not just about in-house Microsoft applications, but it is also about you are able to use connectors from Gmail, from your OneDrive, from different third-party applications like Dropbox, or there are many different third-party applications which provides connectors. And sometimes we are not aware that, hey, I'm using that third-party connector, but this might be a security concern because when you are connecting your SharePoint with that third party connector, for example, then you are passing that data from one connector to the other connector, which means that data is getting transferred, right? And that is where the security comes into the picture. If you are working in an MNC where you are not allowed to use third party connectors into your apps and automations, this is where this is the right place where you should create the data loss prevention policy. So the second pointer exactly emphasizes on the example which I gave, because there is an increase in demand of apps and automations which are built on top of our platform. You need to create a secured environment, and hence we are using data loss prevention policies. And the third part is also the same, that when you interact with third party policies or third party services as form of connectors, so you don't know that you are sharing the information, you just are concerned about building the automation and building the app. But hence this can cause the data leak, as I mentioned, transfer of data from your environment to the third party. Your that connector will get all the information of a SharePoint and also your tenant organization. Hence, DLP policies are important. We should enforce that. Coming to the overview of data loss prevention policies. So this is really interesting. Like now you know why and what was the need for DLP. Now how you can go ahead and create a DLP policy in your environment. So let's just go ahead and quickly talk about data loss prevention policy. So what data loss prevention policies are? These are, you can call as a guide rails, so that these act as your security guards for your environment, by which they can only interact with the connectors which you are allowing them to. So let's say I have a data group classified. There are three different data groups. One is business, non-business, and blocked. Now what I did is I created a DLP policy where I'm adding SharePoint and Outlook combination, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Outlook, and I'm adding these three into the business category, while all the other like Teams, Gmail, Dropbox, all the other connectors which you can imagine and which are part of your Power Platform falls under your non-business. Now, when I create an automate, let's say Power Automate, where I am trying to just create an automate scenario for, let's say, whenever the SharePoint list gets updated, please send out an email or message, not email, and message to Microsoft Teams. But now, when you imagine what I just told, that business has SharePoint, Outlook, right, and OneDrive, and non-business has all the other like Microsoft Teams, etc. Now I can't come whenever I'll trigger this flow, I will never be able to trigger it. Why? Because I'm trying to combine these two connectors, which falls under different data groups. One is SharePoint, and another is Teams. Hence, you will see that data loss error. So this is we are preventing, we are giving, this is a guardrail which we have added. This is how we prevent the users to directly use connectors which a part of different data groups. We'll see that in detail. Don't worry if you don't understand what I'm talking about, data groups, etc. But coming to the next point, data loss prevention policies enforce rules for which connectors. These are classified into different ones. As I mentioned, three different classifications of data groups. One is business, non-business, and the other is blocked. So whenever you hear about data loss prevention policies, you will majorly hear about three different data groups which falls under DLP. One is business, non-business, and blocked. And these can be only created by in Power Platform Admin Center. And there are two different stages you can create. One is tenant level and other is environment level. So let's just look at tenant level policies. You can define the scope to be for all the environments or for the selected environments or the environments except if you want to exclude some. Samik, you are able to hear me, right? Or did I lost?
Yes, you're clear. You're
Yeah,
clear, Srishti.
yeah, yeah. Sure, sure. So I'll move ahead. So as I mentioned, you can create tenant level policies and you can create those for environments, whether only for selected ones or for all, or you can exclude few. We'll talk about how you can place these connectors. I'm not going to come to this point right now. And to create environment level policies, you should, whenever you create, it will affect your Canvas apps and your Power Automate flows. So just make a note of it. Environment level policies you can define for one environment at a time, because you can see that it is environment level and you are creating for one environment, not for all. Tenant means it will comprise all your environments. So now sometimes you may want to block the usage of connectors. So you can group them to the blocked environment. We can come to that later when we go deep dive. Next, if you want to create DLP policy, you need to be a tenant admin or an environment admin. So let's say I am creating an environment level DLP policy. So definitely you need an environment. You need to be an environment admin. If you want to create a policy for one environment, which means you can go ahead and you should have environment admin as well. Tenant related DLP policies can be management tenant admin. Let's just go to the next slide. Interesting thing. Now we talked a lot about the need and what is the overview, what are the different categories, how we can classify connectors, but really how I can create a DLP policy. Now that you can create two types. One is environment level and tenant level, for which definitely if you want to create environment, then you need to be an environment admin. For tenant, you need to be a tenant admin. Now how I can go ahead and create DLP policy if I have these, permissions? We'll go to the Power Platform Admin Center and we'll quickly check how you can create it. So let me go back to the wrong window. Yeah. So what you have to do is, if you have the correct permission, you go to your make.powerapps.com. You can see I'm in make.powerapps.com, and I will click on the Admin Center. And in the Admin Center, you can see there is a section for policies. In the policies, you can see data policies. This is where you can go ahead and create data loss prevention policy. Now, important thing, create and manage connector policies to protect your data within your organization or tenant. So here, when I'm creating data loss prevention policy, this is for my tenant, right? I am a tenant admin. Hence, I was able to navigate to the admin center and I am able to now create the policy for my tenant. Now, if I hit new policy, you will see a beautiful navigation. This is a 5-step process wherein there are connectors, custom connectors defined. You can define the scope, which is you want to add this policy for few environments, for all, or you want to exclude some environments, and review, hit create. This is the simplest creation of DLP policies. I'll create it once I cover all the different things related to creation policy. Now let's just go ahead and see what are the prerequisites for creating a DLP policy. Now, as I mentioned, you need some permission. For tenant level, you need to be a Power Platform admin. You need this Power Platform administrator permission and Microsoft 365 Global Admin permission. If you have these, then definitely you can go ahead and create the tenant level, which I just saw, which you just saw. So you can create those policies. For environment level, you need to be an environment admin. For, let's say I'm creating an environment level for development environment. So if you are the admin for development environment, you can only create the policy for development one. If you want to create for test, then you need the permission. You need to be the admin for the test environment. Only then you can create it for test. And Dataverse database, definitely, because there are Dataverse related connectors as well. You need to be assigned system administrator role as well if you are working in an environment which is a Dataverse environment. So the permission will change to system administrator role. Now let's just go ahead and look at this example of creating a DLP policy. And here I'm creating a tenant level DLP policy. What I'm going to do is, definitely I'm not going to straight away follow these steps. Maybe we can just play with different connectors as well. What they are saying here is, add a SharePoint and Salesforce to the business data group. Now, before creating data policy, it is important for you to understand what are these data groups. So let me just come to the data group part. Yes. Here there are three different data groups. One is business, non-business, and blocked. When I talk about business, what you can see here is connectors for business sensitive data. Connectors in this group can't share data with the connectors in other groups. Now assume you are working in a confidential environment, assuming dev confidential environment. Similarly, you would have test confidential, similarly prod confidential, because whenever you deploy, this is the life cycle of your apps and automates, dev, test, prod. You can also add quality analysis environment as well, but it covers under test. So let's say there is a business sensitive information which is residing in a SharePoint, and that SharePoint has one list which holds all the sensitive information of the organization persons or employees. Now, would you want to integrate this list with any other connectors? Definitely no, because this list in the SharePoint, now my SharePoint itself is sensitive because it is holding all the sensitive information. I don't want that this SharePoint should be clubbed to any other things for my development confidential environment. Okay. So what you can do is now you create a policy for dev confidential environment, and this policy will have business, non-business blocked, three different things when you create. What you will do is in the business data group, I will add SharePoint because for this environment, it is only going to be worked upon by my developers who are working in this confidential environment, and no other developers will work, only this project, confidential project. And they can integrate the SharePoint only with the OneDrive and Outlook, no other applications. So what you will do, you'll create a DLP policy where in the business you will add SharePoint connectors, OneDrive connectors, and Outlook connector, so that they can create automations using these three together. Because if you see the other statement, you cannot use connectors of the other data groups in the same. So let's say if I create an automate with SharePoint, OneDrive, Outlook, and Teams, no, I can't. I can only create these automates and apps which uses same group connectors. Non-business is kind of default. Now assume that you are just playing with some of, or you are just doing POC or applications which are not really sensitive. Okay, these are not using your business data or personal data, but you can just you don't have to worry about whether my data will be shared or not. So this is kind of default group where your teams or other all the other connectors will come and fall into this place. Now the other aspect is blocked. Blocked means, let's say, um, I have an HTTP trigger. Okay, we all know the HTTP trigger of Power Platform. But what happens is, as soon as you add the REST API and just configure with the key or username password, you are good to go. You can get the information from that particular third party application, and you can pass this information to other as well. So now what is happening is this is a major security concern. You should always, according to the best practices, for you should always add your HTTP trigger as a blocked connector whenever you are using it in the confidential space or environment. Why? Because you are not whitelisting this connector at all. You are just getting the REST API. You are good to share the pass the information from your SharePoint to the REST API, and this will pass it to your third-party application because it is just a REST API which is doing posting the information from here and there, right? So always make sure that if you are working in an organization where security is the utmost part, then please make sure to add the HTTP triggers as blocked. Instead, you should use custom connectors because those are wrapped, and you can layer those connectors. You can whitelist those custom connectors for the users to use it. So blocked connectors are the one where whenever you try to add these connectors to your flows or applications, data loss prevention policy will give you the error that this is blocked by DLP and you can't use it. So you can never trigger, never the data, and the data will never transfer from your connector to the other connector. So now when you know these three different data groups, business, non-business, blocked, let's just go ahead. I think I already covered three different data groups: business, non-business, and blocked. So definitely I elaborated a lot on this. Maybe let's go and first see how is data shared among the data groups. Okay, so data can't be shared. Now three different data groups: business, non-business, and blocked. So as you can see, data can't be shared among connectors that are located in different data groups. I already elaborated on this. If your SharePoint is residing in the business data group, you can never communicate with the Microsoft Teams connector, which is residing in the non-business data group. So this is what it is saying. You can't share the connectors that are located in different data groups, but definitely you can talk to the connectors located in the same data group. So here the example is if you place your SharePoint and Salesforce connectors in the business group and you place Gmail in the non-business group, then your Automate or Power Platform makers can't create an app or flow that uses both SharePoint and Gmail. This in turn restricts data flow between these two services in the Microsoft Power Platform. I already gave you the example previously, so this was some different example, but now you know what the statement means. The next is although the data can't be shared with different data groups, but it can be shared among services within same specific group. For example, similarly from the earlier example, SharePoint and Salesforce were placed in the same data group. Makers can create an app or flow that uses both SharePoint and Salesforce together. This in turn allows the data to flow between these two services in Power Platform. The key point is that the connector in the same group can share data in Microsoft Power Platform, whereas connectors in different can't share data. Now let's just go ahead and create a custom connector. Now you know the background. I would just want to create one. Before creating one, I will just show you a quick example. What I did is, let me just edit this data loss prevention policy. I created this just to give you the demo of how it will look like when I create a policy and I try to create apps and flows using it, what it gives me. So this is the name of the policy. Here, I'm assigning the connectors. So this is the utmost important stage when you create a data loss prevention policy. In the business data group, there is non-business data group, block data group. What else do I see? I can see I can search for the connector. Let's say Microsoft Teams. I don't see it in business, but in the non-business, I can see all the teams blocked. I don't have any. Next, set default group. I'll come to this at the end once I elaborate all these stages. Now, what I did is, if I go to the business, I see connectors for sensitive data. So here, we already discussed, if you are working with utmost sensitivity, sensitive information, then maybe good to group them together so that the sensitive developers or who are working on the sensitive environment, they can only interact with these connectors which are part of business group. What I did is SharePoint and Outlook, I have added them as business data. Now let me just go and I can just select this, and if I click on the three dots, I can move to business. Okay. Let's just move to the business. So now you see there are three services, Office 365, SharePoint, and Outlook, which are part of business data group. Now what you can do is you can click on the three dots more and you can go move this back to the non-business as well. Blocked, I'll come to the end, and why you're not able to see this block thing here, we'll see at the end. Okay. In SharePoint, maybe whenever you create apps and automations, you know that there are different triggers and actions. Now, if you want to add those security, those granular layer as well, definitely you can do that. How you can do it for each and every, let me just pick any of the, okay, Dropbox. So now you can see Dropbox has these many actions, and now these are allowed. Okay. As you can see, you can also grab the information what this create file, etc. does. Allow means allow new connector actions, and this is the default setting. Now, what happens is whenever Dropbox, this is a group where all the actions reside. Let's say Dropbox creates a new action. Okay. Now, what will be the default permission? Allow. So whenever it will create a new action, definitely without an interruption, that new action will sit here and it will be in the allowed state. You can update this. Let's say you only want these actions to be allowed to your organ for your tenant, then maybe just allow them and keep those as allowed, and you can update the default to block. So whenever Dropbox team creates a new action, it will be in the blocked state and not in the allowed state. For now, you can keep this as allowed, just we are demoing it. Okay. Same goes with SQL, configure connector, configure actions and endpoints, because you might know that SQL also allows you to add endpoint. What they have done is by default, whenever for this is allowed, star, because what they are doing is this is the first rule which is applied to SQL Server. What this means is this is a rule which is applied that hey, SQL can create any endpoint. Whatever endpoint they create, star all. So star means all the endpoints created by SQL are allowed by default. If you want, you can create a new rule and you can deny, and you can just add that rule as well, that pattern. Okay, let's just go ahead and cancel this. Next, see the connector actions. Similarly, just what we talked about, if there are multiple actions which are created, by default it is allowed. But if you want to block, and if you want the users to use only get, set, update, etc., whatever you want, and you don't want them to bulk insert, etc., those actions, then block it. Just you can follow the same pattern. Now that you know about how you can move it to business and what all configurations you can configure in terms of connectors, actions. Also, you can see some more information. Let's say, let me find out Microsoft Teams. Okay. Now, when I see Microsoft Teams, it is blockable? No. Okay. We'll come to that later about non-blockable connectors. Endpoint configuration? No, because this is in-house Microsoft owned service. And this resides as part of standard connectors, because whenever you go to your Power Automate and you choose the connectors, this falls into the standard and not premium. Okay, you can go and look at more information about Teams. Now you see all these information here, along with you can move to this is so and so. Once you configure your business thing, and rest all the connectors, whichever you have not transferred or not moved to business, will stay as it is in your non business. So now you can see all these connectors will be part of my non business, which are 1113, more than 1000. Now, let me go back and add few HTTP triggers. Now, you see HTTP has HTTP trigger and HTTP webhook. Also, if you want, when an HTTP request is raised, this is the built-in. If you want to be blocked, what you can do is block. These are blockable. While for some, you are not able to see the block. It was disabled for you. Not just for you, for the whole tenant. You can't block it at all. So in the blocked, I've added HTTP trigger. And when I go next scope, what I did is I have applied this policy to all the environments. But you can apply this to only few, and you can what you can do is you can apply to all but exclude few. So you can choose any of those and review the settings and update. Now what I did is, let me just go back and show you the business. I will go back to the DLP policy. Haven't updated it. In the business, I have added these two services, SharePoint and Outlook, while the other is in non-business. So what I did, I created a flow, and this is a manually triggered flow. It is taking the file and getting the items and filtering the item with one particular item and attaching the file to that SharePoint, and then posting a message that, hey, your file is attached. Okay. This is what I'm doing. Now, let me just save this. See, let me just zoom in a bit. I hope you can see it. It is showing me one error. I'm not able to test. Your flow violates your organization's data loss prevention policy. This operations violates admin data policy. This is the policy name, which restricts the use of business connector shared SharePoint online with non-business connector. This is the utmost important statement which we just talked about in this slide. What it is showing the violation error, and it is also telling you the information that, hey, your SharePoint is under business, and there is one connector into your flow which is non-business, which is Teams. You can't communicate, you can't create a flow with these two, because these are part of different groups. So you can never use this into your applications, and even you cannot test it. So this is how your DLP policy works. Now let's create one. Okay, and what we'll do is I will create one so that you understand. DLP demo ICSS. Okay, let's hit next. And what I can do is I want my teams as business. So I will move to business. And also I want my Office 365 move to business. And okay, yeah, I just have important confidential teams, and I want to just get the information of user, pass it to the teams, and let's say we also add Outlook. Okay, and I'm going to add Office 365 Outlook to business. Rest all is I'll come to the custom connector part when I go to the slide, and let's hit create. Okay, let's hit create. Now, what we can do is let's create a Power Automate flow. Okay, manually triggered flow. Okay, and this is the new Microsoft Power Automate designer. Let me just add manual. Okay, let's add this and let's take a text. Okay, Teams message. I will add a welcome note. Okay, this is done. Back. Now, if I go back to the DLP policy, what did we add in the business section? Teams, Office 365 user, and Outlook. Let's just combine all this. Add an action, Office 365 user. I will grab the information, get manager. Okay. Oops. I have to get the profile first. Delete. Delete. Okay. Get my profile. Just hit key more. Get my profile. Sounds good. Now select fields. I just want to, right now, let's select department surname. Okay. Just this much. And let's send a message to Teams. Timur, post a message. User, my channel, and welcome. I will post it in the sales and marketing, just a demo, general. A, I will add this message from the manually triggered flow, Teams message. I'm going to remove this. Now it's done. Similarly, we will send, was Outlook part of it? Yes. We will send an Outlook. Okay, now we can just test this much as well. Now let's test. Hey, this is cool. I was able to use this too. Even if I add Outlook and profile, I can take any combination and I can use it. Why? Because this falls under same group. Now let's test this manually. Okay, continue. Welcome to DLP policy demo and just hit run and it should send a message to Teams. You see, it ran already and I can see that in my details and we can just validate with the Teams. If I can just quickly open. But this ran fine. And what I can do is I can just add one more thing just to validate live SharePoint. And I want to update, well, SharePoint, yeah. Here, update an item, get items. Okay, just use get items. Maybe we are not concerned about updating. Okay, what I'll do is I'll save. Voila, yes, you get the errors, right? So because SharePoint now was not part of our business data group, you can't use them together. You can't use this combination together. So this proves that DLP policy works really fine. Now, another thing which I really want to emphasize on blocked. Right now, when we created this, we did not add anything in the blocked, right? Now, what I'll do is I'm already editing. I'm going to use HTTP trigger. I'm going to move this to blocked. Once I hit next, next, save. Yeah. Now let's come back to our flow and we will remove this SharePoint and use HTTP. HTTP. Let's hit any www dot maybe Google. I'm just going to take Google right now just to demonstrate. Okay, method get header. No, no, no. Let's hit save. The message should change. Your flow was saved but could not be enabled because it conflicts with the company data loss prevention policy. Now, if you see that, is it letting me test? hmm Nope, still. Why? Because this operation violates, which restricts use of business connector with the non-business connector HTTP. Probably still it is in the HTTP non-business, but it should be blocked. I don't know why the message is not updated. Your flow is disabled. I can't enable it for testing. Okay, it is not working. Maybe we can check after a few minutes. The only reason you should add your connectors to blocked means if at all that connector is going to harm your security and it any form it can cause a security breach in your organization, maybe you should block that connector. And similarly also all the social media, right? Whenever you talk about Twitter or any of the social media connectors which are part of Power Platform. Ideally, if you are part of the organization tenant policy, maybe it will be good to add them to the business because that has your personal information or the employee's personal information like Gmail or Twitter or any Reddit, etc. Whatever is this. So maybe it is good to emphasize on the security and not just blindly create flows and automates without thinking about security at the back of your mind. So let's just go ahead and hit our slides to talk more. Okay, we covered this. Next is let's list of the connectors. Now, I know you all were waiting for that few connectors. We were never able to see that blocked, right? And for few, I was able to block them. Why? So these are the list of connectors that can't be blocked. So all connectors driving core power platform. So let's say your data words, approvals, notifications, in addition to the connectors that enable core office function customizations, like which are a part of your Microsoft Enterprise Plan standard connectors like Teams, SharePoint. Those will remain unblockable to ensure that the core user scenarios remain fully functional. So that is why these connectors, which are part of the plan, you can never block it and your users can use it. Okay. However, these non-blockable connectors can be classified. So definitely you can't block it, but you can classify them to business or non-business data groups as per your requirement. Now, coming to the another utmost important part, which is custom connectors. So what happens is custom connectors are similar in function to your HTTP triggers. It also needs your REST API, but these are wrapped, right? You just have to pass the values to the properties. You don't have to add the endpoint. You don't have to, you know, add the body. You just have to pass the body parameters and you just have to configure with the authentication format, which is username, password, or key based or OAuth, right? So that is where custom characters falls in the picture because these are the custom ones which you created. So definitely you should also try to add these in some of the other data groups. So talking about custom connectors at environment level, environment admins definitely can see all the custom connectors in their environments and they can see all those in the non-business by default. Okay. Similarly to your pre-built, because the Microsoft Teams SharePoint has pre-built connectors which you are able to see, your admins can also see custom connectors and they can classify them into blocked business or non-business categories. Custom connectors that are not explicitly classified will be put under default group. So let's say you're not configuring custom connector because right now in this scenario we did not talked about custom connector, we did not move them, right? So it will stay in non-business default group only. Coming to the other slide, DLP policies for custom connectors, which is tenant level. Now, we just created a DLP policy for tenant level, and I would like to highlight something. Let's go back to the Where is it? Yeah, here. Now I will edit the policy. Coming to the custom connectors, you see there is another layer. This layer will only be seen when you're creating DLP policies at tenant level, not in the environment. Okay. When I go to the pre-build and I search by custom, okay, I think I should have open AI. I need to, okay. I don't think I have any custom connector for this environment or this tenant. But if you would have had any custom connector, then maybe you can just click on it and you will find all the similar options like configure connector, block, move to business, etc. But coming to the custom connector tab all itself, you have additional layer. Right now, what here they are doing is they are ignoring. This is the ignore data group. Apart from the three data groups, there is another data group called ignore for custom connectors only at the tenant wide DLP policy. And what we are doing is we are allowing all the custom connectors to be added as part of the DLP policy to the non-business data group. So now if you edit this, you see this ignore, a new data group added, and pattern star means allow all. So as you can see, this is already one rule which is added. What you can do is you can choose any data group and you can add a pattern and you can just give the order. So what it will do is it will follow the order, first order, second order. It will follow the first set of rules, then the second set of rules. Now let's say what I do is I want one custom connector which I created that was for the uh, confidential thing, and it only talks to one third party application which is secured third party. Okay. So now what you can do is you can add a connector pattern and you can allow only that or move to the business directly from here and restrict the other pattern. Right now it is allowed state. Star means everything or anyone creates new custom connector is allowed to use in your organization. So this is what this slide is saying. Tenant admins will see the new tab which you just saw, right, in the data policies wizard, which is called custom connector. This will allow them to specify the order, whichever you add, and uh, what it specifies, either you allow or deny the patterns which are added. Right now, the star was allowed. So hence, the rule for star will always be the last entry because it can't be the first. You should add more orders first and then fifth or sixth order, whichever it is, with the star should be last. So the rule for star will always be the last entry in the list, which applies to all the custom connectors, and it is not matched by any of the previous rules. So what admins can do is they can tag the star pattern to blocked, business or non-business or ignore. By default, the pattern is set up as ignore for new DLP policies. So ignore essentially means you are ignoring the DLP classification for all the connectors in this tenant level policy, and what it does is it defers evaluation of a pattern. So star is just one part of this rule, and you can just place it them to business, non-business, or blocked. Okay. If no specific rule is applied, if there are no rules, then this rule will follow, which is ignore star. So this is what they are talking about, and I think we already saw this blocked order one, and these are some of the examples which for one of the custom connector I created. Now the impact of DLP policies. This is important because you as an end user or as a power platform app maker or automates, whoever you are, like developer consultants, maybe you find these across your apps, automates, and such errors. So as you can see in the automate, we saw such messages. Also, if you're creating an app, you will see using these connections together conflicts with the company DLP and such more errors. So if you have disallowed certain connectors to be used together in an environment by classifying them as business, non-business, or blocked by any of the policies, these restrictions can negatively affect makers, users, of Power Automate. These restrictions are enforced at both design time and runtime. Hence, while designing, you were able to see some error, and while running, when we click on test, it shows in red color, right? So warnings and errors you can see. The other thing which you have to keep in mind is I already covered the demo. Whenever you create data loss prevention policies or you update the connectors from business to non-business, or whenever you manage, like whenever you're editing policy, make sure you test thoroughly in all the environments where the policy is applied, because this will impact all the existing applications and automates as well. So whenever you are updating a policy or creating a policy, the first step is to test it in that environment where it is applied, so that you know everything is functional. And also keep in mind that if the environment is already used based on the previous policy and now you're updating some connectors to something, then that will restrict, or that flows or apps will stop working and they will throw error. So make sure that you test it thoroughly, and then only you apply, and then only you use it in your environment. So these are some of the best practices which I would like to summarize at towards the end. So one is, definitely we know what DLP policies are. They are kind of your safeguards which you are applying. And we all have seen that we are using Microsoft tenants, which are probably demo accounts, or maybe even in our organization there are default environments. So that is where the default environment, you can't give the open playground to everyone. So for your default environments, you should make a policy that it restricts, or it has some blockable connectors or policies in place, so that not everyone who has access, because default everyone has access to. So that is where the security concern, you can add one more layer. Create DLP policies according to your organization rules and regulations and security concerns, and it will help you add a security layer on top of your power platform tenant. Next is set up a DLP policy, definitely for each environment. Maybe it is not a good practice to create one DLP policy and apply it to all, because all the environments have different reasons why you created, right? One is dev, but that is dev for non-business. One is dev for confidential. One is dev for some other processes, right? So it is not a good practice to create one policy and it applies to all. Maybe you should create one policy for each environment. Okay, that is at most important, and you should create it based on the scenario and based on the business rules will fall for that environment. Another thing is fine to tune your connector endpoints. So definitely I mentioned, by connector endpoints, I mean REST API endpoints, or any API endpoints which you are going to use it. You should also limit the access and their functionalities, etc. Also, use a shared DLP. Definitely, if there is a environment for business, you should use that policy for dev, test, prod, because that life cycle will maintain, and your policy will also work seamlessly across this life cycle, because your apps are going to move according to this life cycle. So it is important that you don't create one for all, but you create one for your one life cycle, like dev, test, prod, and it follows the same rules. So you don't uh, start seeing surprising errors in your production environments while everything was working seamless in dev. Also, as I mentioned, you should check before changing the DLP policy. Whenever you are updating an existing policy, please check whether this is going to impact any of the existing apps and applications, automations. Otherwise, everything will fall back. So you have to make sure of that. Also, create a blanket DLP policy for entire tenant. Definitely one for tenant, or and that blocks the connectors that are not allowed in the environment. So these are some of the best practices which I would like to summarize, and probably I would like you to start using and start keeping that in your mindset whenever you create apps and automations into your organization, whenever you work on Power Platform. So as I wrap up my session here, maybe I'm going to stay in the chat. And if you have any questions, please do drop them in. I'm happy to take that up. But I hope this gives you some information about DLP policies and how you can apply them, what those errors are, and now maybe you can be extra cautious when you see that errors, and now you know why that errors are. Maybe that is a good learning for you all. Also, I would like to thank all the organizers, definitely, and also the sponsors for this event for making this happen. And stay tuned for the next speaker, as Samik is going